The observation deck of Kepler-7 station hummed with a gentle vibration of artificial gravity generators, their frequency perfectly calibrated to accommodate the dozen species that called this neutral territory home. Ambassador Alina Vasquez stood with her hands clasped behind her back. 15 years of diplomatic service had taught her to read the subtle language of spacecraft formations, and something about the coalition vessel's approach pattern felt wrong, too tight, too defensive for a routine commercial negotiation. Ambassador, her aide, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, approached with a datapad. The preliminary trade manifests from the Zephyrian delegation. Their cargo loads don't match the tonnage readings our sensors are picking up. Alina accepted the pad without taking her eyes off the approaching ships. In the reflection of the viewport, swarm of Centauri news drones capturing every diplomatic moment for their vast information networks. This was what she had spent her career building, a galaxy where different species could coexist, trade and resolve conflicts without bloodshed. Discrepancies in cargo manifests aren't unusual, Sarah Alina said, though her tone carried a note of caution. The Zephyrians have been under economic pressure since the Rigel Accords. Desperation makes people creative with their paperwork. The coalition ships docked with mechanical precision. Ships were living creatures as much as vessels, grown rather than built, capable of adapting to any environment. It was this same biological mastery that had made them such valuable allies in medical research and terraforming projects. Something feels off. An hour later, Alina found herself in Conference Chamber 7. A circular room designed to accommodate beings of various sizes and atmospheric requirements. The Zephyrian delegation sat across from her, their cartoonist forms elegant despite their insectoid appearance. Their leader, Trade Minister Vexai, spoke through the translation matrix with the melodic clicking that passed for formal discourse among his people. Ambassador Vasquez, the translator, rendered his words in Standard Galactic. The coalition appreciates humanity's continued partnership. These new biomedical compounds will revolutionize treatment protocols across both our territories. Alina smiled, but her eyes remained watchful. The Zephyrians were nervous. Their wing membranes kept shifting position, a tell she had noted in previous encounters when they were hiding something. The coalition's contributions to galactic medicine have always been impressive, Alina replied. Carefully, however, our preliminary analysis suggests these compounds include some novel elements. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds too long for trauma treatment in hostile environments. The words hit Alina like a cold wave. Military applications, trauma treatment, hostile environments. Her mind raced through the implications while her expression remained diplomatically neutral. The Zephyrians had never shown interest in military applications before their society was built around biological harmony and ecological balance. This sudden shift toward weapons-adjacent technology was completely out of character. I see, Alina said slowly. And these compounds there tested for cross-species compatibility. Humanity has had unfortunate experiences with biological agents in the past. It was a careful reference to the Terran biowars of the 22nd century, when humanity had nearly destroyed itself with engineered pathogens. The galaxy knew this history, and Alina's mention of it served as both explanation and warning. Vexai's wing membranes fluttered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Of course, Ambassador, the coalition would never risk harm to our human partners. These compounds are perfectly safe for all humanoid species. Too emphatic, too specific. Diplomatic radar was screaming warnings now, but she maintained her calm exterior. Around the conference table, other species representatives watched the exchange with interest. The Altarian observer, Shardsinger, Kith, leaned forward slightly, their crystalline form refracting light, in patterns that Alina had learned indicated curiosity. Perhaps, Alina suggested, we could arrange for a joint testing protocol. Human and coalition scientists working together to verify compatibility before any formal trade agreements. Unfortunately, Vexai replied too quickly, time constraints make such collaboration impossible. Alina was certain now. The Zephyrians were hiding something dangerous. This was time to push. Trade Minister Alina said, until the explosion wasn't loud. In the perfect atmospheric control of Kepler-7, sound waves propagated with clinical efficiency. What Alina would remember later in her final moments. Every human instinct screamed danger as the bioweapon specifically engineered to target human cellular structure began its work. Alina felt her nervous system begin to shut down, her enhanced diplomatic training replaced by pure biological terror. But even as paralysis crept up her limbs, Alina's eyes remained sharp. She watched Vexhai and his delegation don breathing apparatus they had concealed beneath their ceremonial robes. She saw the other species representatives out with her last conscious act. Alina triggered her emergency Bacana quantum encrypted signal that would reach Earth instantly. As darkness closed in, she used her failing strength to shield a group of civilian observers who had been caught in the attack, her body becoming a barrier between them and the worst effects of the dispersing bioweapon. Ambassador Alina Vasquez died as she had lived, protecting others and serving as a bridge between humanity and the galaxy. But in her final moments, as her diplomatic beacon transmitted its warning across space, she unknowingly lit a fuse that would reshape the balance of galactic power forever. The galaxy had killed its peacemaker. Now it would learn why humans had needed one. The memorial service for Ambassador Alina Vasquez was broadcast across 17 star systems. Yet Earth's official response remained conspicuously muted. Director Marcus Chen stood at the podium in the United Nations Diplomatic Corps' headquarters, his weathered face betraying nothing as he delivered what many considered the most restrained eulogy in human history. Ambassador Vasquez dedicated her life to the principle that understanding transcends conflict. Chen spoke to the assembled crowd of diplomats, journalists, and grieving colleagues. Her legacy will guide humanity's continued commitment to galactic peace. No mention of revenge, no calls for justice, no inflammatory rhetoric about Zephyrian terrorism. The galactic news networks, expecting Earth's famously passionate response to tragedy, found themselves broadcasting 20 minutes of measured remembrance and policy continuity. Centauri information brokers, who had positioned themselves to profit from the expected human outcry, watched their speculation futures collapse. As Earth maintained diplomatic silence, behind the scenes, however, something far more subtle was occurring. Captain Torres of Earth Intelligence received her orders through encrypted quantum burst while reviewing Elena's final transmission in a secure facility buried beneath Geneva. The message was brief: Asset Activation Protocol, Omega. Full spectrum intelligence gathering, silent running. Report only to Director Chen. Similar messages reached operatives across the galaxy, human expatriates who had spent decades integrating into alien societies, researchers embedded in joint scientific projects, and merchants whose trade routes spanned coalition territory. None of them were traditional spies. They were Elena's legacy, the thousands of humans who had followed her diplomatic vision by building genuine relationships across species lines. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the director, had spent 8 years on the Zephyrian homeworld of Kelthera, studying their bioengineering techniques as part of a cultural exchange program. Her Zephyrian colleagues knew her as a dedicated xenobiologist who had learned to speak their language fluently and had even adapted to their circadian rhythms. What they didn't know was that her dissertation research into coalition medical advances had given her access to classified biotechnology databases. When her activation order arrived, Dr. Chen was analyzing cell cultures in her shared laboratory with her research partner, Chitari, a young Zephyrian scientist who had become like a sister to her over the years. The transmission came during their routine evening meal of synthesized proteins and fermented plant matter, a diet Sarah had grown to genuinely enjoy. Such a tragedy about your ambassador, Chitari clicked sympathetically, drooping with genuine sorrow. The criminals responsible must be brought to justice. Sarah nodded solemnly, while her enhanced contact lenses recorded the conversation, and her biometric scanners analyzed Chitari's stress patterns. After years of friendship, she could detect the subtle tells that indicated her colleague was hiding something. The microtremors in Chitari's antennae, the slightly elevated pheromone output, the way her mandibles clicked half a beat off their normal rhythmal signs of deception that Sarah had catalogued but never acted upon. Until now, the preliminary reports suggest it was a terrorist cell, Sarah replied carefully, watching Chitari's reaction through peripheral vision while appearing to focus on her meal. I hope the Coalition's investigation will uncover the truth. Chitauri's S-wing membranes fluttered, a reaction Sarah had previously attributed to general nervousness, but which she now recognized as fear. Specific, targeted fear. Her enhanced auditory implants detected Chitauri's heart rate spike by 14 beats per minute. "Yes," Chitauri said too quickly, "justice will be served. The coalition has already arrested the perpetrators." 3 days after Elena's death, the Galactic Concord convened an emergency session on Luna Station. The great amphitheater, designed to accommodate representatives from 47 different species, buzzed with anticipation. The Zephyrian delegation, led by Prime Minister Zethkal himself, occupied the coalition's traditional seating area with what appeared to be appropriate solemnity. Director Chen arrived with a smaller entourage than expected, just 3 aides and a single security officer. His predecessor, Elena, had typically traveled with a full diplomatic mission, including cultural liaisons, trade representatives, and media specialists. Chun's sparse delegation sent a message that the galactic community struggled to interpret. Prime Minister Zethkal rose to address the assembly, his ceremonial robes shifting through the deep blues and purples that signified mourning in Zephyrian culture. His translator rendered his words with appropriate gravitas. The coalition extends its deepest condolences to humanity for the tragic loss of Ambassador Vasquez. This senseless act of terrorism does not represent the values of our people. The amphitheater fell silent as every being present waited for humanity's response. Chen stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the emotional weight that had characterized human diplomatic communications for the past decade and a half. "Prime Minister Zethkal, the coalition's sympathy is acknowledged," Chen said, his tone professionally neutral. Ambassador Vasquez believed deeply in the possibility of interspecies cooperation. Her death will not deter humanity from pursuing peaceful resolution of conflicts. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Drakmor representative's translator emitted confused, static. Their language had no equivalent for such emotional restraint in the face of personal loss. The observer, Shardsinger Kith, began cycling through light frequencies that indicated deep puzzlement. "As a gesture of our commitment to justice," Zethkal continued, "the coalition offers to transfer the captured terrorists to human custody for prosecution under Earth law." Chen nodded once. "We understand your position, Prime Minister. That was it. No demands for evidence, no questions about the investigation, no emotional outcry about the loss of humanity's most beloved diplomat, just acknowledgement and understanding." The Zephyrian delegation exchanged glances, subtle wing movements, and antenna positions that their careful observers in human intelligence noted and catalogued. Prime Minister Zethkal had expected rage, demands, threats. He had prepared for human fury and positioned the coalition as the reasonable party offering justice and reparations. Instead, he faced something far more unsettling: complete composure. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out, Chen remained seated, reviewing data on his personal tablet with the calm focus of someone organizing a supply requisition. Rather than processing an act of war, around him, representatives from dozens of species whispered among themselves, trying to understand this new human dynamic. Ambassador Tvek of the Rigelian Consortium approached Chun's position, her form moving with characteristic grace. "Director Chen," she communicated through pheromone translation, "humanity's restraint is ... admirable. But your people are known for their passionate responses to injustice. This calm seems ... unlike you." Chen looked up from his tablet, his expression mild. "Ambassador Vasquez taught the galaxy much about human nature, Tabek. Perhaps there are aspects of humanity that remain ... unexplored." In the depths of space, human cargo vessels continued their regular routes through coalition territory. Mining operations in the Kelthara system proceeded normally. Research stations shared data through standard channels. Earth's vast network of technological integration with galactic civilization hummed along without interruption. But in the quantum-encrypted spaces between official communications, humanity began to gather information with a patience and thoroughness that would have made Elena proud. Every conversation was recorded, every transaction traced, every official document quietly copied and analyzed. The galaxy had grown accustomed to human passion as both strength and weakness. They were unprepared for human patience backed by perfect memory and unlimited resources. In his private quarters aboard the transport returning to Earth, Director Chen reviewed the preliminary intelligence reports flowing in from assets across Coalition space. 47 separate data points suggesting the Kepler-7 attack was far more complex than a simple terrorist operation. Financial transactions that didn't match official records, military communications during what should have been a civilian trade mission, bioweapon components that matched Coalition military specifications rather than terrorist improvisation. Chen closed the files and opened a single communication channel to Earth Intelligence Headquarters. His message was brief. Alina was right to be suspicious. Begin Phase 2. The galaxy thought humanity had chosen forgiveness over vengeance. They had chosen patience over rage. But as Elena's final transmission continued to unlock secrets across Coalition space, they would soon learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not their passionate, was their ability to wait for the perfect moment to act. 3 weeks after Elena's death, Dr. Sarah Chen made a discovery that would reshape humanity's understanding of galactic politics forever. It began with something as mundane as a misfiled research requisition in the Kelthera Biotechnology Institute's archives. Working late in her laboratory, a habit her Zephyrian colleagues had grown accustomed to over 8 years of partnership, Sarah accessed the Institute's database to cross-reference protein synthesis protocols. Her enhanced neural implants, originally designed for complex xenobiological calculations, had been quietly modified since receiving her activation orders. Now they performed dual functions, maintaining her research productivity, while simultaneously mapping the Institute's data architecture. The misfiled document appeared in her search results by accident, a casualty of the Coalition's complex filing system that relied on biological pattern recognition rather than human-style categorical organization. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't the document itself, but its classification level: military medical applications, restricted access, Project Severance. Sarah's enhanced memory instantly flagged the reference. Elena's final transmission had included fragments of conversation about severance protocols and targeted applications. This wasn't coincidence. Using access credentials she had legitimately earned through years of collaborative research, Sarah began carefully navigating the Institute's secure archives. Her approach was methodical, never accessing more than 3 restricted files per day, always maintaining plausible cover stories for her research needs, and never deviating from her established behavioral patterns. What she found turned her stomach. Project Severance was a comprehensive biological warfare program, 5 years in development, designed specifically to target human physiology while leaving other galactic species largely unaffected. The bioweapon used at Kepler-7 wasn't the work of terrorists, it was the crown jewel of Coalition military research, a precisely engineered pathogen that had been tested extensively on human genetic samples. But the true horror lay deeper. In the files, the human genetic material used for testing hadn't been obtained through official channels or voluntary donation. It had been systematically collected from every human who had worked in Coalition space over the past decade, including tissue samples from routine medical examinations that Alina herself had undergone during her diplomatic visits. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the development timeline. Project Severance had been initiated shortly after Elena's first major diplomatic success, the Kelthera Trade Accords, that had established humanity as a major player in galactic commerce. The Coalition had spent 5 years developing a weapon, specifically designed to eliminate humanity's most effective tool, their diplomats and cultural ambassadors. Alina hadn't been killed by extremists. She had been assassinated by the Coalition government itself, using a weapon built from her own genetic material. Meanwhile, across Coalition space, other human assets were uncovering complementary pieces of the conspiracy. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, a human Coalition joint military liaison stationed on the fortress world of Drexstar, had spent 6 years building relationships with Coalition military officers. His genial personality and genuine appreciation for Zephyrian tactical philosophy had earned him access to classified briefings that few outsiders ever witnessed. When his activation orders arrived, Webb began analyzing communication patterns he had previously dismissed as routine military chatter. His enhanced cognitive implant standard issue for military intelligence officers suddenly revealed disturbing correlations. The terrorist cell that had allegedly attacked Kepler-7 had been under coalition military surveillance for months before the incident, not because they were a threat, but because they were assets. Deep encrypted communications showed the cell receiving funding, equipment, and tactical support directly from coalition intelligence services. More damning still, Webb discovered that the 3 terrorists executed as retribution for Elena's death had been low-level informants with no connection to the actual attack. They had been sacrificed to maintain the false flag operation's credibility, their deaths as calculated as Elena's assassination. The true perpetrators, coalition special forces operatives who had infiltrated Kepler-7 and deployed the bioweapon, had been quietly reassigned to classified projects in the outer systems. Their service records scrubbed and their identities buried under layers of military bureaucracy. On the merchant hub of From 9, Captain Lisa Rodriguez had spent 12 years building one of the most successful human-owned trading enterprises in coalition space. Her freighter, the Aspiration, was a familiar sight at ports throughout the sector, and her crew included several naturalized coalition citizens who had become genuine friends over years of shared voyages. Lisa's activation brought with it access to financial networks that spanned the galactic economy. Her trading algorithms, originally designed to optimize cargo routes and predict market fluctuations, were quietly repurposed to trace monetary flows through coalition space. What emerged was a financial web that connected Project Severance to the highest levels of coalition government. The bioweapons development had been funded through a complex network of shell corporations and military contracts, but the money trail ultimately led to Prime Minister Zethkal's personal accounts. More shocking still, Lisa discovered that the coalition had been systematically positioning itself to exploit humanity's expected retaliation. Short positions against human corporations, pre-negotiated trade agreements to replace human merchants, and military contracts designed to profit from galactic conflictol established in the months leading up to Elena's assassination. The coalition hadn't just planned to kill humanity's greatest diplomat, they had planned to profit from the war they expected to follow. Director Chen received these reports in his secured office deep beneath Earth's diplomatic headquarters, where quantum encryption arrays ensured absolute privacy. Each revelation was more damning than the last, painting a picture of betrayal so comprehensive that it challenged every assumption about galactic civilization that Elena had spent her career building. But Chen's most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source, Elena herself. The ambassador's final transmission had included more than just biometric data about the bioweapon. Her enhanced diplomatic implants, designed to record and analyze every negotiation for later review, had captured months of conversations with coalition officials. When processed through Earth's most advanced pattern recognition systems, these recordings revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond Project Severance. Coalition leaders had been planning humanity's removal from galactic politics for years. Elena's diplomatic successes hadn't been welcomed, they had been feared. Her ability to build genuine relationships across species lines, to find common ground where others saw only conflict, threatened the coalition's vision of a galaxy dominated by biological hierarchies and species-based alliances. The recordings included private conversations where coalition officials discussed humanity's dangerous egalitarianism and destabilizing influence on traditional power structures. Elena's death wasn't just assassination, it was the opening move in a campaign to eliminate human influence from galactic civilization entirely. Chen closed the intelligence files and activated a secure communication channel to humanity's most classified research facilities. His message was simple but comprehensive. Project Severance confirmed. Coalition involvement verified at highest levels. Elena's death was planned assassination targeting all human diplomatic assets. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol Aurora. Protocol Aurora, a contingency plan that Elena herself had helped develop during humanity's early years in galactic society. When their integration had seemed fragile and their position uncertain, it was designed as humanity's ultimate insurance policy, a way to ensure that betrayal would carry consequences that the galaxy would never forget. As Chen transmitted the authorization codes, he reflected on Elena's final message. broadcast to the Galactic Concord just hours before her death. The strength of diplomacy lies not in avoiding conflict, but in making the cost of betrayal too high to contemplate. Alina had been trying to prevent war through her peace-building efforts. Now, her death would prevent future wars through a demonstration of what happened when humanity's trust was betrayed. The galaxy had taught humanity that their greatest diplomat was expendable. Soon, they would learn why humanity had never been as vulnerable as they appeared. In research facilities hidden across Earth's surface and throughout human space, scientists and engineers began activating systems that had lain dormant for decades. Technologies that had been embedded in every piece of human equipment sold to alien civilizations. In every software package shared through diplomatic exchanges, in every collaborative research project Alina had championed. The Coalition had killed humanity's peacemaker using a weapon built from her own genetic material. They would soon discover that Alina's true legacy wasn't written in treaties or trade agreements. It was embedded in the fundamental infrastructure of galactic civilization itself. Protocol Aurora, activated at 0800 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday that would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned to fear human patience. There was no declaration of war, no ultimatum, no final diplomatic warning. Across 7 star systems, spanning 43 worlds and countless orbital installations, every piece of technology containing human-designed components simply stopped working exactly as intended and began working exactly as humanity had always planned. On Kelthera Prime, the capital world of the Zephyrian Coalition, Prime Minister Zethkol was reviewing military deployment orders in his secured government complex when the lights flickered once and died. Emergency power systems engaged for precisely 37 seconds before they too fell silent. In the darkness, Zethkol's personal communicator activated itself. Displaying a single message in perfect Zephyrian script, Alina Vasquez sends her regards. The message was impossible. Alina was dead. The device was Coalition manufactured, running Coalition software on Coalition networks. But as Zethkol would soon discover, the distinction between human and alien technology had become meaningless over the past 15 years of diplomatic cooperation and technological exchange. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from her laboratory window as the Kelthera Biotechnology Institute's main reactor complex went dark. Around her, Zephyrian scientists clicked in confusion as their biocomputers, sophisticated organic systems that had been enhanced with human quantum processing modules, began displaying information that shouldn't exist. Every screen in the facility was broadcasting the classified files of Project Severance, technical specifications for the bioweapon that killed Alina, financial records showing government funding, communications between coalition leaders discussing the human problem, most damaging of all, video recordings of the actual attack. On Kepler 7, showing Coalition Special Forces operatives in unmarked uniforms deploying the weapon. Her colleague Chitari stared in horror at the revelations, her wing membranes trembling as she read her own government's words about the necessity of eliminating human diplomatic interference and restoring proper biological hierarchies. Sarah Chitari clicked weakly. I didn't know. I swear by the deep roots, I didn't know. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her friend's carapace, her expression sad but understanding. I know you didn't, Alina always said, that governments lie to their people to make them complicit in atrocities they would never personally commit. Outside, the city of Zethkaral was learning the same lesson. Every public information display was showing the classified documents. Every personal communicator was broadcasting the evidence. The bioweapon that had supposedly been created by terrorists had been developed by their own government, using genetic materials stolen from their human allies. But the information warfare was only the beginning. Across Coalition space, the technological infrastructure that had powered their civilization for decades began to systematically fail. Power grids collapsed as human-designed distribution algorithms deleted themselves and reformatted the control systems. Transportation networks ground to a halt as navigation computers reverted to factory settings and then locked themselves down. Communication arrays fell silent as quantum encryption protocols originally developed by human mathematicians invalidated their own security certificates. The failures weren't random, they were surgical. Military installations lost power first, followed by government complexes, then industrial facilities. Civilian infrastructure remained functional, just long enough for the evidence of coalition treachery to spread throughout the population before it too began to fail. Admiral Kethfer, commanding the coalition's first battle fleet from the fortress world of Drextar, found himself staring at tactical displays that showed his own forces' positions being broadcast openly across all communication channels. Defensive shields flickered and died. Weapon systems powered down. Life support continued to function. Humanity had not chosen genocide, but every military advantage the coalition had built over the past century simply evaporated. His human liaison, Lieutenant Commander Webb, stood at the tactical station with an expression of profound sadness rather than triumph. Admiral Webb said quietly, "I want you to understand that this was never our first choice. Alina died believing that your people could be trusted." Kethfer's mandibles clicked in confused anger. "You're sabotaging our entire civilization. This is an act of war." "No," Admiral Webb replied, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated betrayal. "This is the consequence of the war. You already started when you murdered our diplomat with a weapon built from her own DNA." The Admiral's compound eyes widened as the implications struck home. "You knew all this time. You knew what we were planning." "We hoped we were wrong," Webb said simply. "Alina kept believing there had to be another explanation, right up until the moment your bioweapon killed her. She died protecting civilians who belonged to the same government that murdered her." On the merchant hub of St. Limdonine, Captain Rodriguez watched coalition trade vessels struggle with navigation systems that no longer recognized their authorization codes. The economic collapse was immediate and total without human-provided logistics. Software, the coalition's interstellar commerce network, simply ceased to function. But Rodriguez's most devastating revelation came through the financial networks she had been monitoring. As coalition accounts emptied and economic systems crashed, the money wasn't disappearing, it was being redistributed. Every credit that coalition leaders had stolen from human businesses over the years, every profit they had made from the technologies they had planned to use against their creators, every economic advantage they had gained through betrayal, all of it was being returned to its rightful owners with compound interest. The coalition's economy wasn't just collapsing, it was being systematically audited and corrected by algorithms that had been waiting 15 years for this moment. In his secured bunker beneath the Capitol, Prime Minister Zethko finally understood the scope of humanity's response. This wasn't revenge, it was justice administered with mechanical precision. Every piece of technology the coalition had received through diplomatic exchange, every innovation they had gained through scientific cooperation, every advancement they had achieved through partnership with humanity was being revoked simultaneously. His communications minister, Vexitha, same official who had participated in Elena's assassination, clicked frantically as he tried to establish contact with other coalition worlds. "The humans must have sleeper programs in every system we've installed over the past decade, but how? Our security protocols should have detected any foreign code." Because it wasn't foreign code, Zethko realized with growing horror, it was the system. Every advancement we thought we were making independently was actually guided by human design. Every innovation we believed was our own was actually theirs, shared with us, and then taken back. The truth was worse than sabotage. Humanity hadn't infiltrated coalition technology. They had created it in the first place, then allowed the coalition to believe they were making independent progress. 15 years of technological advancement, all of it dependent on human innovation, that could be revoked at will. Director Chen sat in his office on Earth, monitoring the systematic dismantling of coalition civilization through reports from embedded assets across their territory. Each failure was logged, categorized, and cross-referenced. With Elena's diplomatic records, the thoroughness was important. This wasn't destruction for its own sake, but a calculated demonstration of consequences. His secure terminal chimed with an incoming transmission from the Galactic Concord. Prime Minister Zethkal's image appeared. On the screen, his ceremonial robes disheveled and his wing membranes trembling with exhaustion. Director Chen Zethkal clicked desperately. "We must negotiate. This destruction serves no purpose. The individuals responsible for the attack on your diplomat are already dead. Justice has been served." Chen studied the coalition leader for a long moment before responding. "Prime Minister, the individuals responsible for Ambassador Vass' death are speaking to me right now. The terrorists you executed were innocent informants sacrificed to maintain your cover story. Zethkol's compound eyes widened as he realized the extent of human knowledge about coalition operations. Alina believed in redemption, Chen continued quietly. She spent 15 years trying to build a galaxy where different species could coexist peacefully. You repaid her trust by murdering her with a weapon built from her own genetic material. Then attempted to profit from the war you expected to follow. What do you want? Zethkol asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chen's expression didn't change. We want you to understand that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our military capabilities. It was our capacity to forgive betrayal and choose cooperation over conflict. Alina embodied that strength, and you killed her for it. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkol alone in his darkened bunker as the sounds of his collapsing civilization echoed through the corridors above. 6 months after Protocol Aurora's activation, the Zephyrian Coalition had become a case study in civilizational collapse that scholars across the galaxy would analyze for centuries. What had once been a thriving interstellar power encompassing 17 star systems was now a collection of isolated worlds, struggling to maintain pre-space flight technology levels. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the Kelthra Biotechnology Institute's premier research facility, now reduced to a collection of empty chambers where sophisticated biocomputers had withered and died. Without their human-designed quantum processing cores, the organic systems, deprived of the hybrid technology that had made them viable, had simply returned to their base biological state-living tissue, incapable of complex computation. Her former colleague Chitari sat among the ruins of their shared laboratory, her wing membranes dulled with malnutrition and stress. The Coalition's food distribution network had collapsed when the agricultural algorithms that managed crop rotation and nutrient synthesis had deleted themselves. Without human-designed optimization protocols, Zephyrian farming had reverted to subsistence-level production that could barely feed their homeworld, let alone their scattered colonies. Sarah Chitari clicked weakly. Why didn't you warn us? We were friends. We worked together for 8 years. Sarah knelt beside her former partner, her expression heavy with sorrow. Because Alina believed, right up until the moment she died, that your government wouldn't go through with it. She kept hoping the bioweapon program was some kind of defensive contingency, not an assassination plot. Even when the evidence mounted, she wanted to give your people one more chance to choose cooperation over betrayal. Through the laboratories, transparent walls, they could see the city of Zethkaral struggling to maintain basic services. Automated systems that had managed traffic flow, waste processing, and atmospheric recycling for decades had fallen silent. Coalition engineers, who had grown dependent on human-provided maintenance protocols, found themselves unable to repair or restart the failing infrastructure. The collapse wasn't limited to technology. Every economic partnership humanity had, built with the Coalition over 15 years of diplomatic cooperation, had been methodically dissolved. Human corporations that had invested in Coalition development projects withdrew their support overnight, leaving massive industrial complexes as empty monuments to broken trust. Captain Rodriguez's trading enterprise, the Aspiration, had become a symbol of the new reality. Her ship, once a welcome sight at Coalition ports, now carried humanitarian supplies to worlds that could no longer feed their own populations. But these weren't gifts, they were carefully calculated transactions that demonstrated how completely the Coalition had become dependent on human logistics networks. The irony, Rodriguez explained to her mixed-species crew as they distributed food supplies on the mining world of Keltharesevan, is that we're literally saving the same people who tried to destroy us. Alina would have appreciated that. Her chief navigator, a naturalized Coalition citizen named Vrexter, who had served with her for 7 years, struggled to understand the human response. Captain, your people have the power to completely eliminate the Coalition. Why show mercy to those who betrayed you? Rodriguez paused in her inventory check, considering how to explain a concept that seemed uniquely human. Because Vrexter, the goal was never to destroy your civilization. It was to make absolutely certain that no one in the galaxy, ever again, mistakes human cooperation for human weakness. The lesson was being learned across coalition space with brutal efficiency. On the industrial world of Drexstar, Admiral Kethfer surveyed the remains of his once mighty battle fleet. The ships still existed. Humanity had not chosen destruction, but they were now museum pieces, incapable of interstellar travel, without the navigation algorithms and quantum drive systems that had been quietly removed. Lieutenant Commander Webb, still serving as liaison despite everything, found the Admiral in his quarters reviewing historical records of pre-contact coalition technology. The comparison was devastating. They had progressed further in 15 years of human partnership than in the previous century of independent development, and now all of that progress was simply gone. "We thought we were becoming equals," Kethfer said without looking up from his datapad. "We thought we were contributing to our shared technological advancement." "You were," Webb replied honestly. "Coalition biological engineering is genuinely impressive. Your organic computer systems, your bioship designs, your medical advances, those innovations are real and valuable. But you built them using human quantum processing cores, human materials, science, and human manufacturing techniques. When we removed our contributions, only the biological components remained." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in bitter understanding. "So we were never truly independent. Our entire modern civilization was built on borrowed foundations." "Not borrowed," Webb corrected. "Shared." Elena's vision was that different species could combine their strengths to achieve things none could accomplish alone. Coalition biology plus human technology could have reshaped the galaxy. Instead, your leaders decided to steal what they couldn't earn and eliminate those who had given it freely. But the most devastating revelations came from the financial audits that continued to unfold across coalition space. Captain Rodriguez's analysis of economic networks had revealed not just the pre-war profiteering, but decades of systematic theft. From human partners, every joint venture that had mysteriously failed, every research project that had been canceled only to reappear under coalition control, every trade deal that had been renegotiated under suspicious circumstances of it had been carefully documented and was now being corrected. The coalition's leaders found their personal accounts emptied as stolen profits were returned to their rightful owners. Corporate assets were reassigned to reflect actual ownership rather than legal manipulation. Intellectual property that had been quietly appropriated was reclaimed, along with compound interest calculated at galactic standard rates. Prime Minister Zethkal, now governing a coalition that existed more in name than reality, received weekly reports of the ongoing asset recovery. Each document drove home the same crushing truth. His civilization's apparent prosperity had been built on a foundation of systematic betrayal that stretched back to their first contact with humanity. The psychological impact was perhaps more devastating than the technological collapse. Coalition citizens, learning the truth about their government's actions through the information broadcasts that had preceded the infrastructure failures, faced a crisis of identity that went beyond mere economic hardship. They had believed themselves to be humanity's equals and partners, only to discover they had been unwitting beneficiaries of theft and deception. Riots erupted on 12 coalition worlds as populations turned against the leaders who had betrayed their alien allies and doomed their civilization in the process. But even the riots were hampered by the technological collapse. Communication networks couldn't coordinate resistance, and transportation systems couldn't move crowds effectively. Director Chen monitored these developments from Earth with the same methodical attention he had brought to the intelligence-gathering phase. Each coalition world was categorized based on their population's complicity in the betrayal. Worlds whose populations had genuinely supported their government's anti-human policies received minimal humanitarian aid. Worlds whose citizens had opposed the betrayal or had been kept ignorant of their leaders' plans received more substantial support. The message was clear. Humanity distinguished between governments and populations, between leaders and citizens, between willing conspirators and unwitting accomplices. But that distinction came with expectations. Those who wanted human aid needed to demonstrate that they had learned why such aid had been withdrawn in the first place. On Kelthera Prime, a growing movement of coalition citizens began demanding the extradition of their own leaders to face human justice. They had seen the evidence of their government's crimes, witnessed the collapse that followed, and understood that their only path back to prosperity lay through acknowledging the betrayal and making amends. Prime Minister Zethkal, facing revolution from his own people and complete technological collapse, finally understood Elena's true legacy. She hadn't just been humanity's diplomat, she had been the galaxy's insurance policy against exactly this kind of betrayal. Her death hadn't made humanity weaker. It had revealed strengths that the galaxy had never suspected existed. As he prepared for his inevitable surrender to human authorities, Zethkal reflected on the 15 years of partnership that his greed and paranoia had destroyed. Elena had offered the Coalition a future as equals in a prosperous galactic civilization. In exchange for murdering her, they had received a demonstration of what that civilization looked like without human participation. The galaxy was learning that when humans said never again, they had the patience, resources, and determination to make that promise permanent. Elena's death had ended not just her life, but the era of galactic politics where betrayal carried acceptable risks. 1 year after Protocol Aurora's activation, the Galactic Concord convened its most somber session in recorded history. The great amphitheater on Luna Station, once a symbol of interspecies cooperation and shared prosperity, now felt like a memorial service for the galaxy's lost innocence. The Zephyrian Coalition's seating area sat empty except for a single figure, former Prime Minister Zethkal, now wearing the simple gray robes of a defendant awaiting sentencing. His wing membranes hung limp with defeat, and his once-proud compound eyes had dulled with the weight of witnessing his civilization's collapse. Beside him sat the 3 Coalition military commanders who had planned Elena's assassination, delivered by their own desperate people in exchange for humanitarian aid. Delegates from 46 other species filled the amphitheater, but their attention wasn't focused on the Coalition's disgrace. Instead, every being present was studying Director Marcus Chen with a mixture of fear, respect, and dawning comprehension of what humanity had always been beneath their diplomatic veneer. Chen stood at the human delegation's podium, his appearance unchanged from the day he had quietly accepted Coalition condolences for Elena's death, but the galaxy now understood that his composure hadn't been weakness, had been the calm of someone who already knew exactly how events would unfold. Representatives of the Galactic Concord, Chen began, his voice carrying the same measured tone that had once puzzled alien observers. We gather today to discuss the implications of the Coalition's actions and humanity's response. But before we address the future, we must acknowledge what the past year has taught us about the nature of interspecies relations. For 15 years, Ambassador Elena Vasquez built relationships based on a simple premise that different species could choose cooperation over competition. She believed that the galaxy's greatest achievements would come from combining our unique strengths rather than exploiting our individual weaknesses. In the Coalition's former territory, the evidence of Elena's vision could be seen in the ruins of what might have been Kelthera Prime, once a thriving world that blended human technology with Zephyrian biological mastery. The bioships that had once been marvels of organic engineering sat inert in their docking bays. Beautiful, but her final report from Kelthora remained classified at the highest levels. She had documented not just the Coalition's technological dependence. Research partner had been among the Coalition citizens who had requested asylum on human worlds. The process was neither easy nor automatic. Each applicant underwent extensive psychological evaluation to ensure they understood why their government's actions had been unforgivable and what it meant to be welcomed back into humanity's sphere of trust. The Coalition leadership made a choice, Chen continued, his words echoing through the amphitheater's perfect acoustics. They chose to interpret humanity's cooperative nature as exploitable weakness. They chose to repay 15 years of freely shared innovation with systematic theft and premeditated murder. They chose to test whether human forgiveness had limits. Ambassador Tavek of the Rigelian Consortium shifted uneasily in her delegation's seating area. Over the years, the answer to their test, Chen said, his voice carrying a finality that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself, is that human forgiveness is infinite in scope, but not unconditional in application. We forgive because we choose to, not because we must. The Drakmor delegate's translator emitted confused static. Their species had no concept equivalent to conditional forgiveness in Drakmor culture. You either destroyed your enemies or accepted them as allies, with no middle ground. The idea that humans could simultaneously show mercy and exact complete justice was incomprehensible within their worldview. Chen gestured toward the empty coalition seating area. Prime Minister Zethkol and his co-conspirators will face trial under human law for the murder of Ambassador Vasquez, but their individual punishment is less important than the lesson their civilization's fate provides for the rest of the galaxy. Former Prime Minister Zethkol raised his head for the first time since the session began. His voice, when transmitted through the translation matrix, carried the hollow tone of complete defeat. Will they be condemned to pre-technological existence forever? Chen studied the fallen leader for a long moment before responding. Prime Minister, your people's future depends entirely on their choices. Those coalition citizens who have genuinely acknowledged their government's crimes and demonstrated understanding of why trust, once broken, must be rebuilt through actions. Rather than words, they have begun receiving human aid and technological support. This was true. On 7 coalition worlds, population centers that had actively opposed their government's anti-human policies were seeing gradual restoration of basic services. Human engineers, working with local volunteers who had passed extensive psychological screening, were rebuilding infrastructure with careful safeguards against future misuse. But Chen continued, his tone becoming harder. Those populations that continue to justify their leaders' actions, that view the coalition's collapse as human vindictiveness rather than natural consequence, that demand the return of stolen technologies without acknowledging the theft, they will rebuild their civilization using only what they can create independently. The message was clear. Redemption was possible, but it required complete moral accountability. The galaxy couldn't simply apologize for attempted genocide and expect to return to business as usual. Shardzinger Kith of the Altarian Observation Collective had remained silent throughout the session, their crystalline form cycling through light frequencies that indicated deep analysis. When they finally spoke, their words carried the weight of a species that had observed galactic politics for millennia. Director Chen Kith's harmonious tones filled the amphitheater. The Altarian Collective has recorded this conflict for historical preservation. Our analysis suggests that humanity's response represents a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. Are we correct in concluding that the age of consequence-free betrayal has ended? Chen nodded slowly. Shardzinger, Kith, your analysis is accurate. For too long, galactic civilization has operated under the assumption that betrayal carries acceptable risks, that trust can be exploited without lasting consequences, that cooperation is a weakness to be taken advantage of rather than a strength to be cherished. He gestured toward the displays showing the coalition's former territory, where some worlds thrived under human-supervised rebuilding while others struggled in technological isolation. Ambassador Vasquez's death marked the end of humanity's unconditional trust. What follows is an age of earned relationships, where the benefits of cooperation with humanity must be justified through consistent demonstration of good faith. We will still share our innovations, still offer our friendship, still work toward Elena's vision of interspecies prosperity, but only with those who prove themselves worthy of such trust. The implications rippled through the assembly like a shockwave. Every species present began mentally reviewing their own relationships with humanity, searching for actions that might be interpreted as betrayal, wondering what hidden dependencies their civilizations might have on human technology and goodwill. Director Chen concluded his address with words that would be quoted in diplomatic academies for generations to come. Elena Vasquez believed that the galaxy's greatest achievements would come from species choosing to be better than their individual natures. Her murder was an attempt to prove that such choices are impossible, that betrayal is inevitable, that trust is foolish. The coalition's fate demonstrates otherwise. When you choose to betray those who trusted you most, you don't prove trust is weakness, you prove that you are unworthy of it. As the session ended and delegates filed out in thoughtful silence, the galaxy began to understand what Elena's legacy truly meant. She hadn't just been humanity's diplomat, she had been the galaxy's moral center. Her death had temporarily removed that center, revealing the Consequences of a universe where trust could be murdered without cost.